Greetings, Intro Java students. Today we're going to talk about arrays. Arrays are a solution to a problem that you're going to have more and more often as your programs get more complex. So we've already written a program like this where you have two ball objects, and you know that you need a variable to record each piece of information that you want to keep track of about the ball object. So in our particular case here, we need to keep track of the xy coordinates of each of these balls. So here I've got an x1 and y1 and an x2 and a y2. So what happens if you want to make a program like this that has a whole lot of objects? What are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to create 60 different variables for x and 60 different variables for y? Definitely not, because programmers are lazy in the best possible way. So what an array does is an array will let you create a whole lot of variables all at once and then manipulate them all at once. So this is the complete program for this little ball demo here. And it's actually shorter than the other one that involves two balls. So let's get into it. I said a minute ago that an array is a way to create a list of variables. And once you've created the list, you can refer to them by their location in the list. So if it helps you to think of a concrete object here, you could think about an array as being a row of lockers, and each locker represents a variable. You can store pieces of information inside the lockers, and you can get them out just like any other variable. The only difference is you have to refer to them by their location, and the locations always start with 0. Instead of having a picture of lockers, I'll usually do something like this. I'll have a list of values inside boxes, and each box here is supposed to represent a particular locker. And if the name of our entire list, if the name of our entire array is R, then the name of the variable that's the first locker is R0, because it's location 0. The name of the second locker is R1, because it's location 1. So in general, if you want to put something inside one of the variables, the name is going to start with the name of the entire array, and then you'll put a number representing the location in that list. So that's the whole magic. Before, if you wanted to create 8 variables, you would have to do something like this. You would declare int array 0, array 1, array 2, all the way up to array 7, and each of those is a different variable. Now you can declare all of those variables at once using this single line. And we'll look at what all the bits of this line mean in just a second. But I just want to point out that this number 8 means that you're creating 8 variables all at once. And once they're created, you can really do anything with them just like they're regular variables, because they are regular variables. So for example, here if we had an integer variable called n, you could store a number into it. And you could ask, is the value inside n equal to 5? Or you could take the number inside n, add 1 to it, and save it back to n. So in other words, make n 1 larger. And then you could print it out. Same thing over here. Remember, array 0, this refers to the first variable in the list. So here I'm saying take the number 3 and put it inside the first variable in the list. Here I'm saying check the thing inside that first variable in the list and see if it's 5. Here I'm saying take the first variable in the list, add 1, and save it back there. So we're increasing it by 1. Here I'm displaying what it is. So notice that it's exactly the same syntax on both sides here. Okay, so let's talk about how to create arrays, and then we'll jump on Eclipse and you should follow along with me and we'll actually do some things. So the general format is, if you want to create a new array, you start out with the data type. So what type of value do you want to store inside your array? So that could be like int or string or later on objects. Then the square brackets, the opening closing square brackets, mean that you're going to create an actual list of variables rather than a single variable. Then you have the name of your variable. And the way that you would assign a new array is you'd have an equal sign and say new, and then you'd have your data type again, and then inside the square brackets you have a number, which is how many variables you want in your list. So how many lockers in the row of lockers. So for example, data type brackets. So let's say I had int brackets. That means I'm going to create an array of integers. Next comes my variable name, nums, so my whole list is going to be called nums. And then equals new int. Notice int here matches int there. And then in the brackets I have a 5, which means there's going to be 5 int variables in my list. So this line of code would create something that looks like this, an array called nums, and then the variables are called nums0, nums1, nums2, nums3, nums4. When you first create it, it starts out empty. So for an int array, that would be all zeros. Let's look at another example. So here, string bracket bracket makes a string array. It's going to be called names. equals new string 100. So that means there's going to be 100 string variables in my array. So when a string array gets created, it's also empty, but what empty means for a string is a special value called null, which means that kind of there is no object there. So in this case, 100 is too many to put on one page here, so you start out with names 0, 1, 2, and so on, and you end up with names 98 and names 99. Okay, you might be noticing something. I said there were 100 strings, but we end with names 99. Isn't that wrong? Shouldn't we end with names 100? The answer is no, and this is going to be the source of a lot of bugs in your future, because it's kind of a weird thing to wrap your head around. Let's look back at this case. If there are 5 things in the list, and you start counting at 0, let's say this is the first thing, second thing, third thing, fourth thing, fifth thing. So there are 5 things, but since the first thing is 0, the last thing isn't 5, the last thing is actually one less than 5, it's 4. So same thing here. There are 100 things in this list, but because we start at 0, the last thing is 99 instead of 100. It is possible to create arrays with things already inside them instead of creating them empty. So here, for example, if you use a curly brace notation, double brackets means it's going to be an array of doubles, and I can create it with exactly 4 things already in it. So that line of code would create this array. String bracket bracket names is an array of strings, and then here I'm creating it with 4 names in it, and that's what it would look like. Okay, let's go ahead and do some of this stuff. So if you haven't done so already, why don't you make a new project or a new class. Mine's called array example. It should have a main method. And let's go ahead and create some arrays. So I'm going to create an int array to start with, which I'll call nums, and let's create it with some numbers in it. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 3, 1, whatever. So the first thing we want to do is actually display what's in our list. So let's do the natural thing and then watch it fail. So you would hope that you could just print the name of the array and that would work. So let's go ahead and run it. And you see this weird thing. So this is actually the memory location where the array is stored, but that's not particularly helpful. You want to actually see what is in there. So here's how you can do it. You can say arrays.toString. So think about toString as meaning you're going to convert an array to a string, and then give it as an input the name of your array. So this takes your array, converts it to a string, and now you can display it. You do have to import arrays, however. Okay, so now when we run it, cool, this is what you'd expect it to look like. We see 5, 4, 3, 3, 1. Okay, let's just do some really basic kind of practice-y stuff. Let's say nums1 equals 99. So predict what should it look like when you run it and display it. Shouldn't be too hard, but it's a good practice. And I run it, and you see 99 in location 1, which is the next second location over, because this is location 0, location 1. So we've overwritten the value that used to be there, 4. So we've just put 99 straight in there. Okay, what about this? Let's do nums0 equals nums0 plus 1. Predict what that's going to do. So it used to be 5. I take that nums0 value, which is 5, I add 1, and I save it back inside nums0. So that's adding 1 to it, 6. One thing you might be wondering, which is a really good thing to know, is what happens if you try and put something in a location that doesn't exist? So what happens if I try the location -1, for example? Let's put 10 inside location -1. When I do that, you'll notice it crashes. And what it says is it says array index out of bounds exception. So what that means is that you've tried to access a location that doesn't exist. Another word for location is index. So we would say you tried to access an index of -1. And actually you see this -1 over here. It's telling you what the index is that's not allowed. So it's saying -1 is not a location that's allowed. Same thing if we try to access location 100. We run it, and it says index out of bounds, and then 100 is the location that we tried to access that's not allowed. The reason I'm showing you this now is because you're definitely going to see that error in your future, and I want you to know what it means so that you'll be able to debug it more easily. So let's pretend now that the values inside my array represent the y values of several different ball objects. So here I have 5 ball objects. So if I wanted to make them move, I would need to change the y location of each one of these objects. So the whole point of having an array is so that you don't have to do these things one step at a time. If I was going to do it one step at a time, I'd say, let's take the object in location 0 and we'll add 3 pixels. And then let's take the object in location 1 and, see, I'm bored already, and we'll add 10 pixels. So if we had 60 ball objects, we wouldn't want to have to do this 60 times. So I'm going to show you now how you can make a change to all of the things in your array, not all at once, but sort of one at a time in a loop. So you could think about it this way. If I wanted to add 3 to all the numbers in the list, I could do it like this. I could say add 3 to the first number, add 3 to the next number, add 3 to the next number, add 3 to the next number, and I'd go one at a time all through the list. You could think about that like you're going to run down the row of lockers and you're going to open each locker and you're going to do something to the number inside and then you're going to go to the next one. That's what a loop does for an array. So let's try it. I'm going to print out the array value before we do anything to it. Now let's make a loop. So I'm going to make an integer called location that starts at 0, and I'm going to keep going up as long as location is less than 5. The reason I chose 5 is because there are 5 things in the list, which means that the last location number is 4, and as long as my location is less than 5, that means I'm going up to the largest location. And then I'll say location equals location plus 1. Or if you wanted to, you could say location plus plus. So what's happening here? I'm saying we're going to start at location 0. We're going to add 1 every loop, so we're moving our location up by 1. And we're going to keep going until we get to the end of the list. So that's the idea. We're looping the locations from the start to the end. And now we could do something like this. We could say y values, and then I don't want to say location 0, because this would loop a whole bunch of times, but it would only ever change location 0. Instead, I want to put location here, because the point is every single time we loop, this is going to be a different number, which means that we're going to do something to a different variable in the list. So I'll say y values location equals y values location plus 1. So the way you would think about this is you're saying, let's look at the number in a particular locker, let's add 1, and let's save that number back inside that same locker. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the print statement inside the loop here so that we can watch it happen one step at a time. So when I run the code, here we see the first line is what we started out with, 5, 4, 3, 3, 1. But now we've got 6, 4, 3, 3, 1. So we've only taken that first number and added 1. Now we've got 6, 5, 3, 3, 1. So we added 1 to the 4. Now we've got 6, 5, 4, 3, 1. So we added to the 3. So you can see we're adding 1 to the previous value one step at a time. Maybe this would be easier, actually, if we did this. Let's just assign the number 100 to all the locations and watch what happens when we run it. So here you see, first time through the loop, we got location 0, then location 1, then location 2. So we're visiting each location and we're doing this to each location. If we wanted to, we could fill it with random numbers. So I could say int math.random times 100. And now when I run it, you see I've got 54, 84, 80, 74, 6. So I'm assigning random numbers to each element. Okay, let's do one more example and then stop. We've been doing things with an array of ints. Let's make 2 different arrays of strings. So let's make an array of strings called adjectives. And let's fill in some adjectives. Nice, large, wobbly. And now let's make a list of strings, which we'll call names. And here I'm not going to create it with a predefined number of things. Let's say new string, let's do 4. So this is going to be 4 strings. All right, so now let's ask the user to type some names. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop over each variable in this list, and I'm going to ask the user to type a name, and I'm going to save that name into each variable one at a time. So let's make a loop, same way we did last time, where we'll start location at location 0. We'll say location is less than, let's do a different thing this time, names.length. So names.length tells you how many things are in the list. So in our case, names.length is 4. So we're saying the location has to be less than 4, which makes sense, because if there's 4 things in the list, the last location is 3, and we want our locations to definitely go up to 3, but not all the way to 4. And then we'll say location plus plus to add 1 to the location. So same as last time, the location number starts at 0, it goes up by 1 every time, and we keep going till we get to the end. Alright, so now I'm going to say names location equals something. So what I want to do is I want this to be a string which the user types in. So let's do this. String name equals JOptionPane, show input dialog, type a name. So this will have them type a name, and it gets saved into name. And so now we can take whatever name they typed and save that into our names array. Let's go ahead and print our names array so we can see what's happening. So what did we have to do? Arrays.toString names. I don't expect you to remember all of these things right away because there's a lot of them to remember. You should definitely have a quick reference sheet next to you though, and you should know that there is a thing that you need to type, and then you look it up on your sheet and you say, okay, yes, that's right, arrays.toString. And then over time, as you do more of this, you'll definitely pick it up. Okay, let's run it so far and see what it looks like. So I run it, it says type a name, Waldo. So now we see Waldo, null, null, null. And I said null means that there's nothing there. So we've saved the word I typed into location 0. Let's do Aziza. Now Aziza is the next name on the list. We can do Harry, and then Sally. Cool, so we saved each thing one at a time into the list. So let's put together some random short statements using these arrays. So what I want to do is I want to get a random name out of this list. Well, if I'm going to get a random name, the best way to do it is I already know how to make a random number. So I'll make a random number, which is a location. So in other words, I'll get a random location, and then when I look inside my names list, that will be the same as if I'd made a random name. So let's make an int called nameLock1 for name location 1, and it's going to be an integer that's going to be between 0 and the size of the names list. And then let's make another one. So int nameLock2, so that's name location 2. So same thing, random names.length. So now let's print out what those are. So random location number 1 is, and then I'll say nameLock1, and number 2 is, and then we'll print out nameLock2. But then I actually want to do something with those names. So I could say, for example, names nameLock1. So remember, this is the number that is a random location. So now I'm getting a name at that random location. So this will find one random name and then print the word likes and then print another random name. So here we go. So Wally, He-Man, Shira, my good friend, and Walmo. So random location number 1 is 3. Random location number 2 is 2. Remember, those were the 2 random numbers we generated. And so then it went and got the name at location 3, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, Walmo. And it got the name at location 2, which is 0, 1, 2, Shira. And it prints Walmo likes Shira. Okay, so hopefully those were enough examples for the moment. you'll have a chance to practice all of this and more in the problem sets, and then once we've done a couple of practice ones, you'll be able to apply it back in the setting of graphics to make lots and lots of objects do lots of interesting things.